right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for September 26, 2012. Before we consider the minutes, I did want to announce that there is one application. It is S12050 by Mr. Michael Rubino of GPD Group for Thornton's, requesting a variance, a sign variance. That application has been withdrawn. Application S12050. All right, now consider the minutes for our regular meeting of August 22nd, 2012. Those minutes are included with our agenda materials. Are there any changes to those minutes? If not, those minutes will stand approved then as presented. And we'll now consider new business. First, we'll take up sign variance requests. There we have our first application is S12049 by Mr. David McDaniel for Panther Murfreesboro Integra Creek, LLC. He is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 3625 Manson Pike. Ms. Kerr, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Mr. David McDaniels, representing Panther Murfreesboro Integra Creek, LLC, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement without the consent of the easement holder and a Board of Zoning Appeals approval. The sign is located at 3625 Manson Pike and is within an RM16 GDO1 overlay zone. The applicant is requesting permission to install two development ID signs, which will be externally illuminated. These will be freestanding wall signs. Each sign will have 20 square foot of display area and an overall height of 8 foot. The signs will be located within a 30-foot consolidated utility district, water easement, and a 20-foot drainage easement. An agreement for a sign in the City of Murfreesboro easement agreement has been signed by the City of Murfreesboro engineer, the Director of Building and Codes, as well as an approval letter from the CUD's project manager. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations. They will also be required to have a permit for a wall to be erected for these signs to be placed on. That is taking place with Building and Codes at this time. And Mr. John Riddle of Summit Contracting, representing Mr. McDaniels, is in attendance to answer any questions you may have, as well as myself.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions from Ms. Kerr? All right, Mr. Riddle, anything you'd like to add to the application, sir?
No, sir.
All right, then at this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no discussion, I move for approval of the variance request.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Riddle, that application has been approved. As I announced, application S12050 has been withdrawn. So we'll consider now application S12051 by Mr. Bill Jones for Secure Self-Storage, LLC. He is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance prohibiting a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 1620 Las Casas Pike. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. The applicant, Mr. Bill Jones with Secure Storage, LLC, representing Secure Storage, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement without the consent of the easement holders and the Board of Zoning Appeals approval. The sign location is at 1620 New Las Casas Highway and is within an RM16 zone. The applicant is requesting permission to erect one internally illuminated sign with 90 square foot display area and an overall height of 16 feet, consisting of a 50 square foot cabinet top sign and a 40 square foot manual changeable copy sign at the bottom of the sign. The sign will be located within a 45-foot public utility easement as well as a 25-foot storm drainage easement. The agreement for a sign in a City of Murfreesboro easement for this location has been signed by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, the Murfreesboro Electric, the City Engineer, and the Director of Building and Codes. A letter of approval has also been received from Atmos Energy and AT&T. CUD has no utilities at this location and has no interest in the easement. And they will comply with all other setback and regulations on these signs. And just a correction, I said it was RM16. It's a commercial highway zone.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? All right. Mr. Jones, anything you'd like to add? Thank you. Okay, then at this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the application.
A second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Jones, that application has been approved. Thank you. All right, we'll now consider variance. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. We'll now consider variance requests. First one there is application Z12052 by Mr. Mike Chaudhary,
I believe.
Chaudhary, requesting a 200-foot variance from Section 21B4 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that the sale or distribution of gasoline, diesel, or other fuels for motor vehicles will be permitted in the commercial fringe zoning district only when developments for such are set back a minimum of 200 feet from any property zoned in the RS or RD classifications. And this request is pertaining to property located at the southwest corner of New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive. All right, Mr. Blumley, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The first and only variance request that we have today, as you mentioned, is located at the southwest corner of New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive. It's part of a larger tract, and the applicant, Mr. Chaudhary, has a contract on what is proposed to be Lot 1, which is about a 1.4 acre lot, which would be created right at the corner of New Salem and St. Andrews. If we could pull up the aerial photo. See, here's the overall tract. Frontage on New Salem and St. Andrews, directly across the street from the Walgreens and the vet clinic on New Salem Highway. The area that Mr. Chaudhary is looking to carve out is this area here, about 1.4 acres. It's currently zoned commercial fringe. I believe back in 2010, the rezoning of the frontage along New Salem Highway and a portion of the frontage along St. Andrews Drive was approved to be rezoned to commercial fringe. The balance of the tract, however, remains RS-15, and it is undeveloped. There is a requirement in the zoning regulations for the commercial fringe zone which states that, and I'll read verbatim here, the sale or distribution of gasoline, diesel, and other fuels for motor vehicles will be permitted in this district only when developments for such are set back a minimum of 200 feet from any property zoned in the RS or RD classifications. The required distance shall be measured from property line to property line. Well, this particular proposed site is only within 40 feet of RS-15 zoning, and that's the balance of the same tract that it is being carved out of. The applicant proposes to build a gas station with, of course, convenience market and a liquor store. So it would be two 2 tenant spaces, one for the convenience market and one for the liquor store, and he does propose to have gas pumps. Here's the site plan. As you can see, the building, which is about 9,000 square feet, and you do have this plan in front of you. About 5,000 square feet of that would be for the liquor store, and about 4,000 square feet of that would be for the convenience market. And you'll see that he has noted on there where the zoning boundary line is, where the CF zoning meets the RS-15 zoning, and it's just about 40 feet. That plan was approved by the Planning Commission at last Wednesday's meeting, but it was approved contingent upon this variance being approved as well. So that plan that was approved by the Planning Commission, it was subject to staff comments, one of those staff comments being that this variance would be required. Prior to the site plan being approved, the Planning Commission also reviewed a master plan for this tract before a preliminary plat and a final plat is reviewed for property. And you don't have this master plan in front of you. A master plan must be reviewed for an entire tract showing the developer's intentions. So even though the majority of this tract, or the balance of the tract, is zoned RS-15, and only the frontage along New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive is zoned commercial fringe, Mr. Chaudhary submitted a master plan for the entire tract showing several outlots along both New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive, with a total of 6 lots, including a larger lot, which would be the balance of the property, about the southern 2/3 of the property. As I mentioned, the 200-foot minimum distance from the sale of motor vehicle fuel is measured from property line to property line. So even though there is actually a 40-foot distance, 40-foot separation from the RS-15 zone, the applicant has requested a full 200-foot variance. And the reason for this is because it is measured from property line to property line, because a portion of the remaining tract is still zoned RS-15. That means that from property line to property line, he would need the full 200-foot variance. Now, the applicant, in his write-up to the Board of Zoning Appeals, cites several reasons why he is requesting this variance. He states that he anticipates a rezoning request being submitted for the balance of the tract, thus not even necessitating the need for the variance in the future, because he anticipates the balance of the tract being zoned something other than single-family residential at some point in the future. Now, whether or not that ends up being the case is not known at this time. No rezoning request has been submitted for the balance of the tract. It remains RS-15. Another point that he makes, though, is that even though the remainder of that tract is zoned RS-15, is that it is undeveloped at this time, and the actual nearest developed single-family residential properties, and I measured these out on GIS. The piece of property in question where the gas station is proposed to be built is at this corner. It measures about 800 to 1,000 feet from the nearest developed single-family residential lots, being in Belle Reeve Section 3, I believe, over here, and then the Bellhaven subdivision, which is to the south of the overall tract. Now, as I mentioned, we do not have any current rezoning or any official rezoning applications for the balance of that tract. But for the board's reference, I wanted to include the following information regarding the vision for the area set forth in the Salem Pike Study Area Land Use Plan. The plan recommends the clustering of commercial uses at major intersections. It identifies the intersection of New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive as a neighborhood commercial node, which is defined as neighborhood-scale commercial uses that serve a nearby and limited residential market. On the future land use map, it more specifically identifies the northern portion of the overall subject tract at the southwest corner of this intersection as mixed-use limited plan development, which is defined as all medium and high-density residential, institutional, offices with a maximum 30% floor area ratio, and general farming. It recommends that the southern portion of the tract develop as medium-density residential, which is defined as all single-family and two-family residential uses that involve a density of at least 3 units per acre, but less than 8 units per acre. Institutional, convenience-scale commercial uses on a selective and limited basis, and general farming. Now I'll show you some photographs of the subject property. This is looking south along St. Andrews Drive. This is the subject property here. As you can see, it is currently undeveloped. This is looking back at the property from the intersection. That corner is right where the gas station would be located. This is looking down the frontage of New Salem Highway. Directly across the street is Walgreens. Diagonally across the street is the McDonald's and the Publix shopping center. And this is looking across the street, across St. Andrews Drive. The property across the street is zoned PUD. It's the Boxwood Plantation Planned Unit Development that has not yet been developed. This is looking west from St. Andrews Drive at some of the residences that are further to the west in Belle Rive. And this is looking to the north along St. Andrews Drive from about where the nearest residences are on St. Andrews Drive, which formerly was Kimbrough Road. The gas station would be up at the corner. That being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Aaron Lowe from Huddleston Steel Engineering is here to represent Mr. Chaudhary.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley?
I was going to ask that, I guess the reason for the variance request here is not necessarily a hardship, but the fact that the RS-15 portion of the property is going to change in the future, or as well as this Salem Pike study area?
The applicant has indicated that I think because it's his opinion that zoning on the balance of that tract is just an interim type of zoning, and is not. It's his opinion that will not be the zoning of that property in the future, which at this point we don't know, and it's also his position that that standard that this variance should be considered because the RS zoning that is within 250 feet, or excuse me, within 200 feet of the subject property is undeveloped, and I think the nearest developed residential uses are exceed that 200 feet from the subject property.
Okay.
So if the commercial fringe, which is what this is, allows limited commercial development, but the reason we're hearing this is because this is a gas station.
Right. There is a specific regulation in our commercial fringe regulations that states that a lot that is developed for the sale and distribution of motor vehicle fuels has to be at least 200 feet away, measured from property line to property line, of property in the RS or RD classifications. And because the balance of this tract is zoned RS-15, even though it's undeveloped, unless they receive a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals, they will not be in compliance with that, or they will be not compliant with that regulation.
So if the balance of this tract was rezoned commercial fringe, we wouldn't have a problem.
If the balance of the tract was rezoned to commercial fringe, that regulation would not be applicable. Well, it would depend on how they subdivided the lots, because it's measured from property line to property line. If it was left as a portion of the overall tract, they would still have to request a variance. But as it is, they're requesting to, one of their requests that was approved by the Planning Commission was a preliminary plat to divide off that corner lot. And so if that was the case and the balance of the tract was rezoned to commercial fringe, then you're correct, they would not need a variance.
What do we know about what's going to happen in the future with the balance of the lot that's currently residential? You know what? I guess what I'm getting at, Matthew, is that the City Council obviously expressed their intent that for whatever reason they don't want gas stations within 200 feet of residential. And so this one, it gives me a little bit of concern, because I don't know what justification we have to say that we can grant this variance. There's nothing. The City Council hasn't said, well, just because we think down the road the zoning might change, it would be okay to put a gas station within 200 feet of residential. But we don't have any idea. There's no indication at all that the zoning on this tract is going to change from residential to commercial fringe or anything else. So I'm really struggling to find a reason why we would want to. I could grant this variance. I mean, it doesn't meet any of the. So far, I haven't heard, other than what you've talked about. It doesn't meet any of the guidelines to grant a variance. So I would right now my position would be I would much rather see this be converted into an application to the Planning Commission to rezone the property, and see if the Planning Commission, because that's kind of their bailiwick. They talk about future uses of property here, and we just be completely going against what the City Council's intent was in drafting this ordinance. Am I off base?
No, I certainly understand where you're coming from. And at this point, we have several things that we know. We know that a master plan was approved by the Planning Commission for the entire tract, including outlots along New Salem Highway and a larger tract along the south, on the portion that's zoned RS-15. But at this point, we don't have a rezoning application, so the only land use entitlements that are there are what the property is zoned for right now. We do have the Salem Pike land use plan as a guide for future rezoning applications that the Planning Commission and the City Council can use as a guide. So we can say that may be a possibility that it could be rezoned, but at this point, that's an unknown.
By granting this application, we're kind of betting on the fact that it's going to be rezoned. That's kind of the way I see it. I don't know if I want to bet about it.
Can I ask it a different way? I think it's the same issue in my mind, and you may or may not be able to shed any light on this, Matthew, but I guess what came to my mind is, why wouldn't you go ahead and proceed with the rezoning? What are the difficulties in just asking for it to be rezoned rather than going about it this way? Was there discussions among staff about that possibility, or did the applicant just make a choice out of two that he could choose? Or I guess that would be my question, is why it would seem if you had that plan and future use in mind, you would make one application for a rezoning of it. I don't know if you can answer that or not.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I can shed some light as to discussions that were had at the Planning Commission level. One was, and your question is still valid. I think one of the comments that was made is that they felt like that there was an inevitability of it being rezoned, and so that was a comment that was made by staff, not by the property owner. Another comment that was made was that if I recall correctly, I don't know that you were you in the room at the time?
I was not present at that meeting.
I don't think so. I think Mr. Ives was. That this gentleman that owns the property, I don't think ever intended to develop it himself. He can speak for himself, but it's now his property. I don't know that it was the intention was by his choice to have this property, but he has a prospective buyer, but it can't close, and he can speak for himself. My understanding was it couldn't close until this got rezoned. Now, why we are not asking for the entire property to be rezoned, I think he needs to address that question, because I can't remember what the answer was.
I'm not sure that was addressed.
Okay.
And the applicant isn't here today, but Mr. Aaron Lowe with Huddleston Steel is here representing him. He may be able to answer some of these questions.
And the applicant is the contracted purchaser, so the applicant is not the current owner of the property.
That's correct. Mr.
That's
Chod.
probably your answer, because if I'm buying property, I'm not going to try to get the rest of your property rezoned for you. I'm just going to worry about what I want to buy. I mean,
Well,
that would be
Mr. Chaudhary is the gas station developer who has a contract to purchase the property.
Okay.
New Salem Strategic Investments, I believe, is the name of the owner, and I don't know if they have any prospective buyers for the remaining for the remaining property other than Mr. Chaudhary as a prospective buyer for the corner piece of property.
Okay.
Confused.
But don't we somehow, I mean, it looks like, and I know you're going to tell me the flaw in this, but it looks like if we grant this, I think as the Chairman points out, either we're effectively rezoning the rest of this property in some ways, or allowing houses to be put within 200 foot, which is forbidden. So, I mean, we're doing one of two things there, neither of which seems to be within sort of the purview of what we normally would do. But I understand the other side of the applicant's position, and apparently the sellers found themselves in not really wanting to be a developer of this property, and so I understand more about it now, but I think some of the same questions still are there.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Thank you, Matthew. Mr. Lowe, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Good evening, Chairman and board members. I'm Aaron Lowe. I work with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'd like to point out that if you look at the master plan, the lot directly to the south and directly to the west is zoned commercial, and really there's just a small triangular piece of property that does abut this, where it's actually 40 feet from the corner of our lot. It's a triangular piece of property, and on our master plan, we delineated it as a future detention pond. And it's in between the 3 commercial lots and the Colonial gas line easement. And we're showing that on our master plan, and really, it's probably not going to be hard to really develop anything in that area as residential. Show that. See right here, this little triangle. So I guess what I'm saying, if you actually measured 200 feet from our property, and I don't know the exact dimension, but if you came over 200 feet, we're really in that gas line easement. And even if this property never got rezoned to commercial, or the majority of it, if it stayed residential, we're around 200. We would be probably 200 feet from the closest residential lot in the future.
Can I ask a question? So are you saying, and I don't have a pointer, but if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying that triangular piece of property, are you saying that just the section between the gas easement and what abuts the property in question is the only portion as to why we're even having this discussion?
Well, it's, as Matthew pointed out, there's no property line there now. So I guess the 200 feet is based on the property lines. But I guess if you...
So let me ask it a different way.
Yes.
The residential zoning, show me where it begins and ends.
The zoning line is right along, it's here, and then it makes a sharp turn, and then it goes there. So we have a future commercial lot here.
Right.
And that's already zoned, commercial fringe.
It is zoned, but it is not platted or
Okay.
Okay.
We've got our lot, and we've got another future commercial lot here and here.
Already zoned.
So all of this is commercial. And really the way the zoning line is currently, we're left with a little triangle here between this Colonial gas line easement, and you really cannot do any developing in it.
All right, what beyond the gas line easement to the southwest, I guess, what is that? What is that zone?
Well, that's currently RS-15.
So it is.
This big portion.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
That's all. That's the resident RS-15.
Okay.
So can you give us any numbers on the distance from the corner of the property in question to the southwest side of the pipeline easement?
That's a good question.
The best I can, and I don't have a scale, and it's going to be, it's real close to 200 feet between our corner and the edge of the gas line easement.
Because you're not going to build, the point is, you're not going to go in there and build houses on top of Colonial's
No, there's no way.
You're going to have to come to the southwest of that to develop residential if it stayed residential.
Right, and with our master plan that we had approved through Planning Commission, we designated this triangle area as a detention pond for any future developing in the big piece.
That entire triangle would be a detention pond? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, because we're showing Mr. Shad Hari, if he builds his gas station, he'll be building a driveway here and then over to New Salem. And then also shown on the master plan would be a joint driveway
behind
along here, and then we would connect here. And then, so that leaves just a kind of a no man's land triangle that's not big enough to really do anything in it, and it makes a good location for a detention pond.
You're already commercial fringe, so if you had a house, you'd be down there, and you're at 200.
And and I can't speak for the seller, but I believe they were inherited this property, and they'd like to sell off a few out parcels if they can. They did have, a few years ago, had another company do a concept master plan that showed a big box type store or grocery store on the property, but as Matthew pointed out, nothing has ever been submitted for approval on that.
So as part of your discussions, was there a discussion to rezone the triangle versus even having this
No,
come before the BCA,
No,
knowing that the fact that it was going to be a detention pond?
We never discussed that with them to have any of it rezoned.
And why would that be?
Well, we just I don't know. We just never, and it was never brought up, and
I mean, to me, that would be a alternative versus, I mean, you're already here, you've gone through the process, but that would have been an alternative to not even come before the BZA at all. So I would have thought that that would have been discussed. That would have been an alternative, correct?
it would have been, yes.
Okay.
Can you tell me how much land this little triangle is? I see the triangle, but I have no idea if it's an acre or 2 acres or
Well,
half acre.
it would be less than an acre, and I'm estimating it because our corner lot is a acre, 1.4 acres, and just looking at it, it's smaller, so I'm guessing it's probably a little less than an acre.
But yet, it would appear that while maybe not desirable or contemplated by the existing master plans can be changed, and that looks like it possibly is big enough to put a house on.
Well, that is true.
Well, I mean, it would be nice if one of the commercial folks would buy that little piece, or could they? And that way you could...
Well, it would, as we have it planned, that's just a goods area for a detention pond, and it's not. And these corner lots along the street, and then the corner lot and the other couple lots next to it is downhill from it, so they cannot really use that area for a pond. So it would be used for the big piece of property, the remaining piece. So that would be the reason they wouldn't want to include it with one of the commercial lots.
Stripes, can we put any, we have the same owner, although this applicant is a potential buyer. Does the board have any ability to grant it subject to development constraints on the rest of the property or construction of residences or any similar type issues on the remaining land? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I can give a definite answer, but that while the board has the ability to put certain conditions on, I'm frankly not sure that you would have that authority to put that on and have it be binding.
I thought that was the answer, but I just thought that would be some way to address it.
And we're talking about being within 200 feet of residential. Does the PUD not come into play either across the street?
No, the way the ordinance reads is that it's within 200 feet of an RS or RD zone. It does not mention any kind of planned development zoning.
Okay.
Now,
is that planned development zoning residential, though?
It's a mixed-use planned development. There will be, or as it was proposed before the economic downturn, there was proposed commercial uses, I think along the frontage of both New Salem and St. Andrews, as well as I think some single-family detached homes and some townhomes as well. After it was originally approved, the property owner had a portion of it rezoned back to RS-15, but that was further to the east along New Salem Highway.
So this restriction doesn't apply to multifamily PUD, only residential, single family. And what is RD?
RD is residential duplex.
Why would you be worried about
Some residential, not others.
and not others? Okay. That's
All
not
right.
my job, I guess. That just
Got to get
popped in
elected.
my head,
Get
isn't it?
elected and worry about that. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Lowe? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
I'll start. I mean, I saw this at the Planning Commission level. Honestly, I guess I wasn't listening, other than I heard that it was going to have to, it was subject to a BZA approval. I'm a little hung up on the fact that, based upon what that triangle would be used for, and my understanding after your comment that if any residential would be built, it would be built on the southwest side of the gas pipeline. I'm a little gray or don't understand why that parcel was not included as part of the application to be commercial fringe, and we wouldn't be dealing with this at all. I'm sure there's a reason, and maybe the reason is this applicant doesn't want to buy that portion of the property, but I don't know that if the inevitability is that all the surrounding area is going to be commercial, which is kind of what we discussed at the Planning Commission level, is why not go ahead and rezone that parcel commercial fringe. And I don't know that you can. The buyer probably doesn't want to make it as part of this lot because he's not going to want to buy it. But at the same time, I think that now that I hear Mr. Chairman Rogers' comment and Mr. Dodd's comment, I don't know that we can bank on what we may think might happen in the future. And so I'd like to hear at least why we wouldn't zone that corner that we're speaking of, commercial fringe. I mean, there's got to be a reason. I just don't know what it would be. So after saying all this, I don't really want to, at this point, not knowing the answer to that question, want to move for disapproval of this. What my consideration would be is to defer this until we can get an answer to that question.
Mr. Halliburton, if I may just kind of chronologically point out a few things. When the property was rezoned to commercial fringe, when the frontage was rezoned to commercial fringe back in 2010, that was before a master plan had ever been to the Planning Commission. So I don't know if, I know you had mentioned why that part wasn't included back in when the property was rezoned to commercial fringe. I don't know that at that time a master plan had even been designed. Certainly, if it had, it hadn't made its way to the Planning Commission until this just a few months ago. And I don't know if they had contemplated any that detention pond, or if they were just asking for a specific amount of frontage along New Salem and St. Andrews without knowing how that might be designed in the future. With that being the case, not having a specific development plan in mind back in 2010, they might not have had the forethought to include that detention area in with the commercial fringe zoning.
And it's just the fact that it's a gas station or fuels for vehicles, whatever the fancy term you use, just because that use is what's pointing us to this little triangle, right? Because if it's just a storefront, then it doesn't matter that it's a residential collection area.
Right. It's a permitted use in the commercial fringe zone, but because of the sale and distribution of fuels, it does require that separation according to our zoning ordinance. But you're right. You take away the the sale of fuel, that element of the business. If it were a convenience market alone, then it would not be required to have that separation.
But based upon what we know now, or let me rephrase that, based upon what we know the applicant is applying for, that it is a gas station, then would it not be at least worth the discussion as to whether that section, and the fact that we know that it, or we don't know, but we may propose that it's going to be a detention pond, that they look at rezoning that piece to commercial fringe. You know, I think, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody on this board, and I'm doing a lot of talking, but I think the hesitancy here is that we're about to grant a variance on something that we don't see where the hardship is, and that's kind of that's a little difficult for us to figure out. Let me put it this way: it's difficult for me to figure out.
I would agree. Procedural type things, it doesn't fit into the model.
Right.
Yeah, as a practical matter, I mean, my take on it is this: as a practical matter, when you take in the sort of the oddity of the ordinance that says no RS or RD, but it's okay for somebody else that's living there, and this corner, likelihood that somebody's going to build a house in that little corner is probably nil. You know, and am I okay with a gas station on this corner? I mean, all those things, to me, I have some comfort level with. It just seems to me we're dealing with something that we normally don't see, which is really a zoning change issue as opposed to what we would typically see as a variance, and maybe that's why we're all struggling with it, because if you read the definitions, I'm not sure where this one fits into the sort of relief that we would typically grant. That's, as a practical matter, I haven't had it explained to me in more detail. The danger of somebody having a house right here on this property line is, you know, has been dissuaded to some extent, but it still seems to me that we're doing something that we normally don't do, and really it looks like, to me, we're talking about a zoning change issue as opposed to what would typically be a variance because of the shallowness or narrowness or shape or topography. Or, I mean, when it talks about practical difficulties, I've always assumed that to mean with the property, not with other development issues. And I'm kind of guessing here, but probably the practical difficulty is that the sellers find themselves as commercial real estate developers, and probably unless they sell this, they won't have any seed money to be able to do all the things that we're talking about doing over this property to come in and get it all zoned out the way they need to finish the development. That's my guess. And so this is maybe seen as a possibly more or least less expensive way to come to BZA and get this way.
I certainly wouldn't feel right in granting that with, you know, the situation we're in. I agree with the chairman on that, that I don't know how we could do that.
Yeah, I struggle with it. The application asks us to do something that's completely against the ordinance with no justification other than don't worry about it. It won't be an issue, and I can't go with you on that. I mean, effectively, we would be substituting what's a planning commission function with action here, or maybe even a city council function, and drafting the ordinance with what we're doing here. I would not feel comfortable about doing that. It just gets down to it. There's just no justification for it. I don't feel bad about it. It would be okay with me to put it there, but it's just the fact that it's blatantly against the ordinance that I just can't. I can't go there. All right. Well, unless there's any further discussion, anybody want to make a motion?
Is there a thought about deferral versus I know Mr. Halliburton mentioned that, but I don't know what
Well,
they come to us with.
Right, the only thing that comes to my mind with a deferral, I mean, of course, if we deny it, they're going to be looking at having to get it rezoned anyway. I would, this is just my opinion, before we would deny it, I would like to hear a reason why it wasn't, commercial fringe, and whether that would sway our hardship thinking or not, based upon that reasoning. Of course, the applicant's not here to tell us that one way or the other. That would be my only argument or position for deferring it versus denying it, but that's just my thought process. And I'm not sure what that argument's going to be in the end, but at least that would give the applicant an opportunity to give us that argument.
Well, and following up Mr. Halliburton, both the applicant and the landowner would have an opportunity to come in and explain why this application should fit into the criteria of the ordinance.
Right.
Yeah, I would feel better hearing from them. At least they would be able to come in and make a case. Whether we were persuaded by that or not, it's yet to be determined. But I hate to stand in the way of people's private business deals, and I would hate to just not at least give them some opportunity to come in and tell us what the thinking was and why it's here, as opposed to planning or some other plan to rezone it, or why it had to be this way as opposed to other options.
And it's my recollection that the application was the rezoning application was first made as a planned commercial development, but that planned commercial development, after it went to the Planning Commission, I believe when it got to the City Council level, it was decided that, and I believe our legal department came back and said that there wasn't enough specificity in that planned commercial development application, and that it needed to be a traditional commercial zoning classification. Now, I would have to go back and look at our files to see what the size of the portion of the tract, whether it was all of it or just a part of it that matches what was eventually rezoned to commercial fringe. I'll have to check and see what was the reasoning when it went to the Planning Commission and the City Council as to why it was just the frontage that was rezoned. And also I'd like to look at what the initial requested area was as well, and I'd be happy to give you that information as well.
Mr. Blomley is accurate that this is one that we looked at, a planned commercial development with a very loose, to put it mildly, plan, and it was determined that was not an appropriate amount of plan to have included if you're going to grant planned development status to a tract. I don't recall whether it was just this corner or the entire tract that was coming in. But regardless, the PC planned commercial development was denied, and it sat for a while, and then it came back in, and the frontages came back in for zoning. But we can check, we'll verify the details. But yeah, it is one that it was probably at least a year, if not 2 years ago, when that came in as a planned development.
And I don't recollect if it was denied or if I know the Planning Commission recommended approval, but I think that on the basis of a recommendation by the legal department, I believe it was withdrawn and then sent back to the Planning Commission or reapplied for it, the Planning Commission as commercial fringe instead of PCD.
That could be, but ultimately it didn't happen. It did not get zoned to planned commercial.
I don't have any objection to having it deferred. I would candidly be real surprised if they could say anything that would I think the only solution to this is just to rezone this property. If they want to put a gas station there, the only solution for me is to rezone the property. But I want to be open-minded about it, and if somebody has something that would be compelling, I'm willing to listen.
But I think the thing to remember, I think one of the issues is, because just rezoning the whole tract will not solve their problem. Am I right about that? Because you're still going to abut, it's property line to property line, and you're still going to be abutted to RS-15. So in conjunction with rezoning it, you would also have to subdivide it by plat to separate those property lines. Am I wrong about that? Or
You're correct, and I think that is their plan, to actually subdivide it off. So
you would have to have a twofold process to alleviate this conflict amongst property lines. But if they just came in and rezoned the whole thing, they still would be abutting RS-15, and since the ordinance says property line to property line, even though the gas pumps are up here to the north, you still would have an ordinance issue, even though you would have plenty of clearance from actual pump to the houses.
Yeah, and when I say rezone, I kind of just assumed that they were going to parcel off that piece that they're talking about. That's kind of assumed in what I was thinking.
that's correct. That is their plan to carve off that corner. If they carved off that corner and the balance of the tract was zoned something other than RS or RD, then they would be in compliance with that section of the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Well, they could have the whole thing zoned commercial, couldn't they?
It's a possibility.
Eliminate the whole problem, too. Not just commercial fringe.
There are, a variety of
restrictions in commercial.
Well, a variety of different classifications that 200-foot distance would not apply to. If they rezoned a portion of it to residential multifamily, or if they rezoned it to office general, that 200-foot restriction would not apply. It's just the RS and RD classifications that where that restriction comes into play.
Which is frankly why I have a hard time just telling them no, because, I don't know what the logic is behind that. It's hard to make sense of it. Somebody smarter than me probably understands why it's that way, but practically I don't understand the distinctions, why it would be that way, which is why it's, like I said, as a practical matter, I don't have any issues with the application, but the functionality of the board and what we normally see and do seems to be at conflict with what we're being asked to do. That's
with that, I'll make a motion. Mr. Plumley, help me out here. Do we need to defer it to our next regularly scheduled BZA meeting? Would that be the thing to say, or not?
I think so, and I think I'd like to ask Mr. Lowe to come back up to the podium to see if his client and if the landowner would be able to provide some additional information by the next meeting, and to make sure that they would be able to attend as well.
I would think that they probably could. If it's a month away, but I can't speak for them. But I think they just want to sell the lot, so I think they would do what they can to be here and try to make this happen. So,
well, Mr. Halliburton, if we just make it a motion to defer and leave it to the applicants to come back, and if it takes them 2 months, that's fine.
Okay.
Or if they elect to withdraw, that's up to them. Or if they're ready to come back next month in time to get it on the agenda, we'll have it then.
All right, then that's what I'll do. I'll make a motion that we defer.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Lowe, that application has been deferred.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, good discussion. We will now consider special use permit requests. Application Z12053 by Ms. Stacy Beasley. She is requesting a special use permit in order to conduct a home occupation hair salon. And this is at her residence located at 1328 Farmwood Drive. The property is located in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Subject property, as you mentioned, is located at 1328 Farmwood Drive. This is the area, is a larger area along Manson Pike and Brinkley Road that was annexed into the city in the fall of last year. It was originally annexed, I believe, back in 2006, and had been tied up in litigation for a number of years, and then was eventually, that litigation was settled, and the property became effectively annexed in October 2011. Now I'll show you the overhead here. A good portion of this, all of this subdivision along Clover Hill and Farmwood, and some of the other subdivisions along Brinkley and Manson were included in that. It was quite a number of parcels that were brought into the city limits. Earlier this year, the city tax department began sending notices out to people who had businesses in this area or who had county business licenses, notifying them that they needed to get city business licenses as well. Ms. Beasley received the notice from the city tax department notifying her that she needed a city business license as well, because now she was located within the city's jurisdiction. Ms. Beasley has been operating a hair salon out of her home there at 1328 Farmwood Drive since about 2007. However, she did not receive approval from the county's Board of Zoning Appeals when she began operation. When she began operation at this address, she applied for and received a county business license, but by the information that was provided to us is that the county clerk's office never notified Mrs. Beasley that she would need to go to the county planning department to find out whether or not she needed any kind of special zoning approval for to operate a home-based business. Well, upon calling the county planning office, I was informed that in order to have been legally established in the county, she would have had to have received a conditional use permit, that's what they call it in the county, for a major home-based business, and that would have been applied for and granted by the county's Board of Zoning Appeals. Because she was not approved by the county's Board of Zoning Appeals and had not received that proper zoning approval in the form of a conditional use permit, she does not have any grandfathered status. In other words, she's not a lawfully established non-conforming use. A number of the businesses that came into the city in October had been through the county's Board of Zoning Appeals and had been legally established. So whether or not they met the city's requirements, as long as they actively maintained their business and did not abandon that business, they continued to be lawfully established non-conforming uses. But since Mrs. Beasley's hair salon had not been legally established in the county, there is no grandfathered status for her business. So what she is doing now is making application to the city's Board of Zoning Appeals so that she can make her business, make her home-based hair salon compliant with the city's zoning regulations, since it has no grandfathered status through the county. Mrs. Beasley has indicated, had she known that she needed approval from the County Board of Zoning Appeals, she would have, upon applying for her business license, contacted the County Planning Department to find out what she needed to do to become legal. But because she was unaware of the steps that she had to go through, she did not do so, and now upon being annexed into the city, she finds herself in this situation. As I mentioned, she has been operating this home-based hair salon since 2007. The property is a large tract, approximately 5 to 6 acres. located on Farmwood Drive, which is the cul-de-sac. You'll see that their house is located about 300 feet from the cul-de-sac of Farmwood Drive. There is there's a singular drive coming in off of Farmwood Drive, and then that driveway loops around the house. It's a gravel drive with the exception of the area just to the south of the house, which is concrete. This is zoomed in a little bit further. The salon, or the house itself is kind of a U shape, and the salon is actually operated out of the back portion of the U, out of a room in there. The parking actually occurs, the customer parking is under this existing carport, which is within walking distance of that salon, salon. Now the entrance, the exterior door that leads into the salon, is actually in the inside of the U, so kind of in the little alcove there. Here's a floor plan of the house. As you can see, here's that little alcove. The entrance into the salon is right around here, and this is the salon area here. So folks would park in the carport, which would be approximately here, and then walk here. And this is what they're doing right now. Mrs. Beasley has indicated that the operation of the hair salon will not change from how it's being operated now to, if she's approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, she will just continue operating in the same manner. Now you have a floor plan that was just emailed to me earlier that shows the actual layout of the hair salon itself. Mrs. Beasley, as I mentioned, has indicated that the operation of the business will not change from how it's being operated right now. Clients will visit the salon by appointment only. Days of operation will be Tuesday through Saturday. Hours of operation will be from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m., with the last client of the day leaving no later than 8 p.m. The applicant has indicated that the maximum number of appointments that she will schedule per business day will be 5, and that she expects between 2 and 5 appointments per day. She has indicated that she will have some hair care products for sale in her salon, but the products will be only sold at the time of appointment, and there will be no walk-in customers. She has indicated that she will not have any signage for the business, and staff has contacted the barber board to verify that no signage is required, and the barber board does not require any signage. So they are looking they're not requesting any signage. There's none out there right now, and they're not requesting any. Ms. Beasley does hold a license from the state as a master barber stylist. However, she informed staff that she was unaware that her residential barber shop also needed to be licensed by the State Barber Board. If approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, she intends to apply for the required licensure with the Barber Board. So she holds her license as a stylist, but her shop does not currently hold a license with the state. The zoning ordinance dictates that not more than 25% of the area of the principal structure is allowed to be devoted to the home occupation. According to the property assessor's website, the total square footage of the home is 4,702 square feet. According to the applicant, the salon area is 288 square feet, which is roughly 6% of the area of the principal structure, falling well within the requirements. In addition, Ms. Beasley has indicated in her letter that she will have no employees and that there will be no alteration to the existing house, that there will be no alteration or no outdoor storage associated with the business, and that there will be no group instruction, addressing the other standards specific for home-based businesses. As mentioned previously, the subject property is approximately 5 acres in size, and the house is set back about 300 feet from Farmwood Drive. The driveway into the site is primarily gravel with the exception of that one concrete area. The applicant has committed in her letter to the board that she will properly maintain the existing gravel driveway. And considering the size of the property, there's ample room for customer parking, and no on-street parking is expected, as it would be much more convenient for her customers to have to walk from that carport than it would be for them to have to walk the 300 feet from the actual street. If the board approves this request, staff recommends the following conditions. The home-based business must be properly licensed by the state of Tennessee. All appointments shall end no later than 8 p.m., and all client visits shall be by appointment only, and there should be a maximum of 5 appointments per business day. So those last two are just reiterating the manner of operation that Mrs. Beasley has specified in her letter. Now I'll show you some photographs that Mrs. Beasley has submitted with her application, as well as some photographs that I took as well. This is looking at the driveway coming in from Farmwood Drive. You can see the house is way back off the road. This is looking straight down the driveway to the house. This is where the driveway splits in front of the house and loops around. This is the side of the salon here, and that's the carport in which her customers currently park and will continue to park and just walk across the driveway into the salon. And just looking once again at that carport where the customers will park. And this is just looking into that little alcove area, which sits in between the two sides of the U in that U-shaped house. And this is the exterior door on the inside of the U that leads into the salon area. Let me see if I have any additional photographs. This photograph is just looking south from the salon itself. As you can see, it's a very treed lot. And this is looking from the house to the nearest residence to the north. You can see it's in the distance there. And this is the back part of the U-shaped building. This is where the salon would be located, or where it is located, rather. And this is the driveway of the property to the southwest. You can see the house isn't even visible from the road. And this is looking from the street at the neighbor to the north. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before and after the public hearing. Both Mr. and Mrs. Beasley are here as well if you have any questions for either one of them.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. and Ms. Beasley, anything you all would like to add to the application? Okay.
This is our neighbor. He was asking a question. Even a very hard hearing, I would like to talk to the group here.
Okay. Okay. Well, then at this time we'll conduct a public hearing and ask anyone present that's wishing to speak to come forward to the podium. And if, yes, sir. And if you would, please state your name and your address for us, please.
My name is Gary Welsh. I live at 1322 Farmwood. I share about a 700-foot property line with the Beasleys. My driveway, from the picture that the gentleman showed, is the one that's got the 2 tracks going down back into the woods. My driveway is physically about 25 feet on the cul-de-sac from the Beasley's driveway, the closest neighbor physically to their piece of property as far as houses goes. I'd just like to support their request for this special use permit. I've lived at my home for the last 23 years. I have to say that the subdivision is 2 roads, Farmwood ending in a cul-de-sac, absolutely empty during the daytime. I appreciate what traffic is generated as kind of a quasi neighborhood watch, if you will. I haven't had any problems with the traffic. The Beasleys have always been very respectful of me and my property. And I think that it should go ahead and continue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Welsh. Any questions for Mr. Welsh? All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else present wishing to speak for or against the application? And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the...
Chairman Rogers, I want to raise one issue in looking at the photographs. I know that at either some number of steps or some height, and I'm not sure which, building codes requires that there be a handrail along steps. And I think I noticed 4 steps, and I think that either 3 or 4 is the trigger for a requirement that there be a handrail. And I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest that an additional contingency be added that the applicants check with the codes department, and if a handrail is required, that they provide a handrail. If it's not required, that's fine, but if it is required, those, of course, are for safety, for people who come up and down stairs, especially old people like me that need a little support, that they have a handrail to help them get up and down safely. So I would like to add that they verify that requirement with codes and comply with it if it is a requirement.
Okay. All right. Another thing I would like to add is, as we did with the, I think it was a daycare last month, add a provision if the application is approved. Add a provision simply saying that the special use permit will lapse upon the sale of the property.
I think I've seen from the audience that I believe Mr. and Mrs. Beasley are nodding in agreement to both of those conditions that have been brought up.
Right. All right. Well, do we have a motion?
With that, Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve this special use permit subject to the conditions of staff, including the condition recommended by Mr. Ives regarding a handrail and your own request for a lapse upon sale.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. and Ms. Beasley, that application has been approved. Thank you. All right, we'll next consider application Z12054 by Pastor Eddie Turner for Family Worship Center. He is requesting a special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use, which is a church, in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. And this is for property located at 3041 through 3045 Memorial Boulevard. The applicant is seeking approval to expand the existing parking lot and to construct a solid waste enclosure.
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Blomley takes care of other business, for the record, the applicant is a current client of mine, so I'll be abstaining from any discussion or voting on this particular agenda item.
All right. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Bear with me just a moment. As you mentioned, the property is located at 3041 and 3045 Memorial Boulevard. It's the former location of the Carpenter's House Church on Memorial Boulevard, which is just south of Regal Drive. The applicant, Family Worship Center, has a contract to purchase the property and wishes to relocate its sanctuary onto the subject property. This property may look familiar to you. Back in March, there was another church, Global Empowerment Tabernacle, that came to the Board of Zoning Appeals seeking an amendment to the original special use permit for a daycare at this church facility. Global Empowerment Tabernacle no longer occupies the building. They have since vacated the building, and as I mentioned, Family Worship Center is looking to take ownership of the property and move their facilities to this location. In order to meet their demands for parking, however, the existing parking lot is not sufficient to meet those demands, and so they are looking to construct a parking lot addition of about 68 parking spaces. That number changed a little bit from what I have in my write-up because the site plan has been revised just ever so slightly from the original submittal, and so they're looking to add a net of 68 parking spaces. No additions of new structures are proposed other than that of a solid waste enclosure. Currently, the solid waste facilities are out in the open, and they propose to actually move those solid waste facilities further from the existing subdivision to the north and actually put them in a masonry enclosure with landscaping. So they're definitely looking to improve that situation. First, let's look at the aerial photo. As I mentioned, the subject property located at 3045 Memorial Boulevard. That's the actual church address. And then the parsonage, which gains access from the church parking lot, is located at 3041 Memorial Boulevard. Now, the applicants are looking to actually combine both of these properties because, and at some point in the past, they were actually subdivided out into two lots. But they're looking to combine those two properties, and their parking lot addition will actually cross the property line that currently adjoins those two properties. And you'll recall that in the application in March by Global Empowerment Tabernacle, this northwest corner of the property, which is currently fenced in, was where the proposed playground was to be for the daycare. The applicants are looking to construct additional parking in that area as well. And now you do have the site plan in front of you. You can say here is the area where that playground was proposed to be located. You'll see that they are extending that northern row of parking spaces towards the west property line and then creating a new row of parking spaces to the south of that at the rear of the property. Here is the proposed masonry dumpster enclosure with landscaping to be located around it. I believe in my experience of having been out into the property over the last year, I believe the dumpster has usually been around this area, just not in an enclosure. And also along the driveway aisle that runs to the south of the existing buildings, there's only parking on the north side of that driveway aisle adjacent to the building. They're looking to add a row of parking spaces along the south side of that aisle. Because this parking addition and the construction of the solid waste enclosure constitutes an expansion of an existing institutional group assembly use in an RS-15 zoning district, a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals is required. Now, the site plan was on the Planning Commission's agenda last Wednesday, and it was approved on the consent agenda. And one of the staff comments was that a special use permit had to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they had made application to the Board of Zoning Appeals simultaneously with their application to the Planning Commission for site plan approval. The plan also includes some additional parking lot lighting, and they have submitted a photometric lighting plan showing that the lighting on site will not exceed 1/2 foot candle at the property line, which that's the maximum standard that we apply to lighting levels at the property line. It's not zero all the way around the property, 0 foot candles. There is a little bit of spillover, but none of it exceeds that 1/2 foot candle requirement that's in our zoning ordinance. The applicant, as I mentioned, is not looking to add any buildings, but they are proposing to add 68 parking spaces, bringing the total number of parking spaces to approximately 214. With regards to the parking, the number of parking spaces that would be required is much less than what they have out there already right now. And our zoning ordinance only requires 1 parking space for every 8 fixed or mobile seats in the main place of assembly in a church. So they are exceeding our minimum parking requirements. The proposed parking expansion in the northwest corner of the site, in this area here, because there will be headlights shining north into those residential lots along Regal Drive, one of the recommended conditions of that staff has recommended for the special use permit is that the existing privacy fence that is along this property line where the new parking is proposed, that be left, and if it's ever replaced or if it's ever taken down, that it be replaced with a like privacy fence, so that the headlights of those vehicles parked in those parking spaces do not shine into the backs of the homes that are located on Regal Drive. I've got some photographs of the property to show you for your reference. This is looking down the northern driveway aisle along the north side of the property, looking back from Memorial Boulevard. This is the front church building being viewed from Memorial Boulevard. The special use permit for that front church building was approved back in 1988. This is the southern driveway aisle that runs to the south of the proposed building, and there would be parking constructed along the south side of that driveway aisle. And this is what is located. This is the undeveloped portion of the property that's located in front of the parsonage. Just another view of the south side of that driveway aisle where there will be parking spaces constructed. The second church building on the property, which is the larger building at the rear, a special use permit was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals for that back in 1996. And this is the parsonage on the property. It has been indicated to staff that one of the church ministers will reside in that house. And as I mentioned, the property line between the parsonage property and the church property cuts through where the parking addition will be. So one of the conditions that we recommend is that a re-subdivision plat be recorded to remove that property line so that the parking lot does not cross that property line. This is looking over at the northwest corner of the property where a portion of the new parking area will be constructed. This is an existing outbuilding on the property. The solid waste enclosure will be constructed just to the north of that existing outbuilding. This is that fenced-in area where the daycare was proposed to be located. Of course, that fence will be torn down and parking will be constructed in that location. And this, once again, is that fenced-in area, and you can see that existing privacy fence which the applicant is committing to maintaining. And just once again, looking at that fence, there is a tree line on the, appears to be on the property line, but it has not been identified whether or not that tree line is on the applicant's property or whether or not it's on the residential properties to the north. And this is just looking at where that fence ends at the end of the existing parking lot. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. Number one, the existing privacy fence along the north lot line adjacent to the proposed parking lot expansion must remain in place. If it is ever replaced, it must be replaced with a privacy fence of the same height. And I did neglect to put the condition on there that the property must be re-subdivided to combine the two lots into one lot of record. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Pastor Turner could not make it today, but Pastor Jerry Vincent, Pastor Jerry Vincent, excuse me. I was advised of his name before the meeting, but it just slipped my mind. Pastor Jerry Vincent, one of the other ministers at Family Worship Center, is available to answer any questions, as is Mr. Chris Griffith and Mr. Jay Bradley, who is the design engineer on the project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, thank you. Mr. Vinson, Mr. Griffith, Mr. Bradley, anything you all would like to add? All right. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Chairman Rogers, I'll make a motion that we approve the special use permit subject to staff comments and the rezoning from 2 lots to 1 lot.
The re-subdivision.
Re-subdivision, excuse me.
No second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that application has been approved. Thank you. All right, that completes special use permit requests. We'll now move to staff reports and other business. There we have at least one agenda item, the consideration of the 2013 Board of Zoning Appeals calendar of meeting dates and submittal deadlines. Mr. Blomley, you want any special surprises there?
No special surprises. As you know, we were waiting on the Planning Commission to review their 2013 calendar, and once they approved their 2013 calendar, I emailed you a copy of what I have proposed for the 2013 BZA calendar. A few things of note. As you know, in general, we meet on the 4th Wednesday of every month. However, because of the holidays in January and July, the Planning Commission meetings have been pushed back a week. So they meet on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday in January and July. But conveniently, there are 5 Wednesdays in those 2 months. So for January and July, we're looking at the 5th Wednesday of the month as opposed to the 4th Wednesday of the month. And in November and December, to get a little bit of additional separation in between meetings, in 2012, this year, in November and December, our meetings are going to be on Mondays, and that's what we've done for the last 2 or 3 years. But in looking at the calendar, I noticed that this year, for example, our meetings in December and November are kind of compressed. So I thought to get a little bit of extra separation in between the October and November meeting and the November and December meeting, we'd look at Thursday for a possible day to hold the meetings in November and December. And so we're looking at November 21st, 2013 and December 19th, 2013. And I wanted to get the board's thoughts on the dates overall for the calendar, but and specifically what I've proposed for November and December.
Just tell me when and where to be. I'll send Davis.
So you're saying Thanksgiving is not until the 28th of November?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And I've tried to avoid scheduling any meetings during Thanksgiving week, Christmas week, or New Year's week. I know that there's a lot of people traveling those days, so I'm trying to get our meeting the week before the holidays.
All right. Any questions, comments? Looks good.
If we could have a motion, I would appreciate it.
Make a motion to approve the calendar?
I'll second.
Motion is second. Further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other business then?
No, sir.
Any other business from the board? Then we're adjourned.